Batman. It feels good to be somewhat back to normal. 4 books, kind of a typical number to review for you guys today. Those of you guys wondering about the baby, we're still waiting. Due date was yesterday, so who knows at this point. This week we got Batman the Knight, issue 7 of 10. I've really been enjoying this limited series from Chip Zdarsky. Not sure how it's going to impact the main Batman title, if at all, now that he's on that book. But it's been cool to see such an extensive look at Bruce Wayne's training period from when he left Gotham City to when he comes back as Batman. Pretty much as an extensive a take as we've seen, at least in comic book form. We also got Catwoman, issue 45, written by Tini Howard. Another great cover, by the way. This title always has great covers. We are starting a new arc with this issue, so curious to see where this title is headed, especially with some of the goings-on that happened with Catwoman in 125. Penultimate issue I picked up this week was Nightwing 94. Another great cover on this one, promising to be a blockbuster of an issue, if you will. Last month, Nightwing felt a little bit lackluster for me, so curious to see where it goes here and if it kind of picks up some steam. And then finally we have, I think, the conclusion of the first arc of World's Finest by Mark Waid, illustrated by Dan Mora. A book that just looks fantastic, but is kind of empty calories. So we'll have to see how this wraps up. I'm not really anticipating picking this up again after issue 5, but with this arc wrapping up, I will certainly give you guys my thoughts on this first arc as a whole, and what my final thoughts are on the title. And so there you go. That is the reading list for this week. I'm excited not to have to cram. It feels good to be sort of back to normal routine. So I'm going to get reading and let you guys know what happened this week. Alright guys, so I got the chance to sit down and read all 4 of my Batman books. The question is, what did I think of them this week? It was kind of a weird one. Honestly, none of them blew me away. None of them were frustrating or bad. They were all just kind of alright. So difficult to organize these, but I think I've been able to organize them from least favorite to most favorite. I'll say there was one that kind of stood out as probably the weakest. Also one that stood out as probably the strongest. And then the middle 2 I flipped back and forth multiple times before kind of settling on an order. So just know that, you know, the bottom book, I'm not going to rant about it. I actually liked it. Top book didn't blow me away. I'm not going to rave about it. And the books in the middle basically are a tie. So kicking things off, what was at the bottom of my list this week? I'm actually going to give it to Catwoman 45. Last week I said this was a book I was going to be watching closely, and that it overall has been sort of going higher and higher in my ranks, so it feels a little bit weird putting it at the bottom here, because it's actually delivering on some of the things that I sort of expected it to deliver on. I put this in one of my 5 titles that were kind of in the more must-read category because I thought it would likely kind of interweave with some of the goings-on in Batman. And sure enough, actually this title, probably the highlight of this issue, is when it intersects with the Batman-Catwoman conversation from issue 125. You get that same conversation, but from a different perspective. It's Catwoman's perspective this time, and we kind of get to get inside her head during that conversation and kind of what she's feeling, which I thought was effective. I thought it was really well done. There's also a tie-in to the goings-on in Batgirls, issue number 8, which I thought was fairly well done as well. The reason this ends up at the bottom of my list is really just because the title didn't have that much of an identity of its own this time around, which was a little bit surprising. Here you get a little bit of development between, you know, Catwoman and Valmont. You get her interacting with various Bat characters across other titles. You have more human trafficking going on, which has been sort of a major, you know, theme of the book up to this point. But we didn't really go anywhere. It was just kind of a one-off, various rearranging of various plot threads that we've seen before in the Catwoman title, and we get a cliffhanger here that isn't particularly impactful. It just sort of promises more of the same. So it'll be interesting to see where this really ultimately goes. I believe this is supposed to be the start of a new arc, but on the title page it doesn't even really have a title, I don't think. I think it's literally just says Catwoman, and that's it. So clearly this is sort of a little bit more of a connective title. Hopefully we get a little bit more of a strong direction with issue 46. Overall, No huge worries with this book. I enjoyed it fine. It just was lackluster, especially because I was expecting it to kind of move forward in a little bit more of a meaningful way. The other reason this one ended up on the bottom, which you can kind of tell because I kind of gotten to this point now, where about halfway through we have an artist shift, and we're looking at two different artists that don't really go together all that well. Which is just a pet peeve I have, and it's on display in this title, unfortunately. So with issue 46, we'll have to see how things go. Still excited about this title, just a little bit of a, I don't want to say dud, but a little bit underwhelming this week. All right, the second title I want to talk to you guys about this week is Nightwing 94, a book that I have been back and forth on over the last couple of months, just feeling like it's spinning its wheels. I was really close to making this second from my favorite, but it just didn't quite get there. It was edged out by another title, but just barely. I thought this one was very solid. We finally got a little bit more going on. We're spending more time with Melinda Zucco. She's dealing with Blockbuster more, and Nightwing is trying to deal with this corrupt police commissioner, and just a lot more moving parts in this one that felt like we were really starting to go somewhere, which I really liked. There's also kind of a great sort of sting operation that happens that Oracle and Melinda Zucco and Nightwing all sort of concoct, and you see that executed in this issue. And so, for that reason, really enjoyed it overall. I think the biggest problem I still have with this title, even with this issue, and I was really trying to put my finger on it, because last month when I read it, I couldn't figure out why I was underwhelmed. And I think after reading this issue, I think I put my finger on it, which is that they're not using these characters to the fullest. You could just do so much with Melinda Zucco. Like, that idea of her as a character could just have a lot more drama and interesting elements going on, but instead it's just kind of a gimmick. Like, she could be anyone. Blockbuster and Heartless and their whole dynamic is underdeveloped, and so you just are kind of left with this sort of piecemeal feeling. And I definitely felt it at the end of this issue when Melinda Zucco walks into a situation where the executioner is about to be executed because Blockbuster thinks that this is the person betraying him when it's actually Melinda Zucco. And there should be a lot more drama in this than there actually is, because who cares about the executioner, right? Like, you could have developed that character more and made that more of a focal point so that, she's really trying to play 3-4 different sides, when instead it's kind of a very straightforward choice. And Blockbuster leaves her alone with him. And I thought it was a trap. It turns out it wasn't a trap. It just was a convenient moment so that she has an opportunity to potentially get out of it. Now, whether she does or doesn't, obviously you got to go read the issue to find out. But it's those kinds of things where I just feel like Tom Taylor is a lot better at exploiting those kinds of, tense moments than he is in this. And I don't know why it is, because I think about back on his run on Injustice. Like, there were so many great tense moments that were just built up by the way he set up the characters and how they played off each other. Earth 2, same thing. I just recently read his Suicide Squad run. Same thing there. And yet here, it's just not quite coming together. So, a little bit disappointing. But overall, this was a very good issue. It was a step up from last issue, in my opinion. And I'm still very much on board. I'd recommend it. Go check it out if you want to. But you kind of have to go back to the beginning, probably, because there's been a fair amount going on. This certainly isn't the issue to start fresh with. So then, what's the issue that eked out Nightwing this week? Well, wouldn't you know, it was World's Finest. I had a pretty good time with this issue, actually. It was a good conclusion to the story. Honestly, the only reason it edged it out was because of the art. Dan Moran artwork was just outperformed Nightwing on a significant level, especially because we didn't have the regular artist on Nightwing. We had a fill-in artist, and so this kind of became a shoo-in because this story also felt like it paid off more so than the title has up to this point. Now that we're on the final issue, they have to kind of bring it back in. They have to rein it in and focus things. And I think that Mark Waid did a good job of creating a better balance with this issue. The biggest thing being, the actual fight with the demon and what they do to kind of subdue him. last issue there's this promise that, you know, the only way to get rid of him is by going into his chamber and locking him from the inside. It's the only way you can defeat him. And so seeing our heroes navigate that and then find a way around it and beat the odds is actually really, really satisfying. It was super clever how they went about it. If this had just been 2 issues, this could have been a great story. Like, I was thinking, why don't you make World's Finest like a 64-page, you know, extravaganza every month or every other month if you need more time. You know, this could feel like a classic World's Finest book if you just reined it in a little bit. It's too bad that they, you know, made this 5 issues and then just dumped a bunch of other stuff into it, because you could have really simplified things and had a really fun, clever story unfold in a classic sort of Silver Age fashion. So, I don't know. Jury's out on this one. Am I going to get issue 6? Now I'm kind of on the fence because I had so much fun reading it this week. The other thing, too, is there is a lead-in to the Batman versus Robin arc that's coming up. I'm not sure exactly what all titles that's crossing into, or if it's a miniseries or what, but it's teased in this, and so I'm kind of glad that I read this just to kind of know what was happening going into that. So I guess, I don't know, I'm going to go back and reread issues 1 through 5, just all of them together, and see if it helps the story along, or if it still feels like a jumbled mess. I'm really curious to see. Maybe this is just a title that works better in trade. I don't know. Okay, so then last, but certainly not least, pick of the week had to go to Batman the Knight this week. This isn't a runaway hit. It doesn't completely blow me away in the way that my picks of the weeks often do. But this was a very, very solid, entertaining read for sure. Just a great character study of Bruce Wayne when he encounters magic, because this is all about his apprenticeship with Zatara and his relationship with Zatanna. And that was really, really interesting and cool to see. In Batman Urban Legends, you know, there's this whole backstory of Batman and Zatanna and this relationship they had had in the past. And in that, I found it really unbelievable. That's not a relationship that I really knew anything about. I don't know where that really came from. Feel free to let me know down in the comments where that comes from. But I haven't read the stories that comes from. But this very heavily insinuates that, you know, this has been an ongoing thing. And in this one, I find it much more believable, because in that, you know, it's really just the two of them in this relationship. And I just don't buy that, you know, Batman would be in a relationship with someone who's magic based, because there's just such a lack of control there, and they're just operating on completely different planes. And the reason why it works here is because they actually acknowledge that, and they spend time discussing it. The whole point of this issue is, should Bruce Wayne become a magician or not? Like, should he embrace the dark arts, so to speak, and basically forego all his prior training to go all in on this alternate route to become a sorcerer like Zatara? He's, of course, tempted because it provides the opportunity to commune with his parents. There's a clear demon threat here that, you know, he has the opportunity to overcome and, you know, save potential innocent lives from. So all the elements are kind of there for him to make a turn. But of course, he's on the road to becoming Batman. He's going to choose an alternate direction, and of course, we get to see him grapple with that in this title. Overall, just a really strong outing from Chip Zdarsky yet again with Batman the Knight. This was a title that people were talking about a ton when it was coming out. Heard a lot of people saying positive things about it. Haven't heard as much of late. So let me know down in the comments, like, are you guys still on board with this? I think it's continuing to be really strong. Just a great episodic deep dive into what Bruce Wayne was like when he was training to be Batman. Really, really good stuff. Alright, so that wraps up my thoughts on This Week in Batman. I hope you guys enjoyed these reviews. I will be back maybe next week, maybe not, still to be determined. But either way, be on the lookout. I will have more Batman content coming soon. In the meantime, I hope you guys have a great week in comics. Thanks for watching this video. Take care.